Hi. My name is Daniel. I'm a software developer from the Widlarz Group. We specialize in making mobile applications in React Native. When we are not doing work for our clients, we also try to do some good in open source world. We have two libraries, an emoji picker and React Native Notificated for handling the in-app messages, in-app notifications. And basically, and that's us, that's me. And today, I would like to talk to you about file-based navigation for your Expo and React Native apps. And it is now allowed thanks to Expo Router library, which has been released some time ago. It's still in beta. Actually, just now, it was like an hour ago, a new version was released, release candidate version. It's almost out of beta. I had the chance to talk about it 2 months ago during the React Native community meetup in Krakow, and at that time, its API was a bit different. I mean, the API of the Expo Router library, it was kind of different. A lot of things have changed. We now also have some new things. So obviously, the presentation today is updated, and we will start with briefly going over the library itself, how it looks, its main goal, so to say. Then we'll take a look at this API. We'll also take a look at how you should structure your project if you want to use Expo Router. And the last part would be a live coding session in which we will try to see the Expo Router in action. So without any further ado, let's start. Oh, by the way, I added a screenshot of the tweet from Evan saying that the library has a new version. So navigation, depending on the platform we are building for, we have different approaches in which we can handle navigation. So if you are doing React Native applications, probably you might have heard or used React Navigation or a React Native Navigation by Wix. If you do web apps, you probably know a React Router DOM, or maybe you do Next.js apps. So you already see that we have different approaches, different kinds of APIs. For example, with Next.js, we handle navigation with files. We have a file-based navigation system. And I mentioned React Navigation on purpose and Next.js on purpose, because if we try to answer a question of how does the navigation with Expo Router look like, we'll quickly realize that it's kind of best of both worlds, because the Expo Router, it brings some routing concepts from the web world to mobile. It's native, so with Expo Router we can get kind of a Next.js approach to navigation. The library, the Expo Router, it uses also a React Navigation under the hood. So we still can get a native feel to it. Thanks to Expo Router, our project can be deep linkable by default, meaning that you don't have to map certain paths to certain screens yourself. It's done automatically. The only thing you need to take care of is to just define a URL scheme or set up universal links or app links, but the rest is done automatically. And obviously, it's a cross-platform solution. And I guess these four are main characteristics of the library. And I think we can go further and talk about the API. We'll start by looking at the file structure of an example Expo Router project. But before we do so, here's a fragment from the article that Evan Bacon wrote. He's an author of the library. The article is pretty cool. You can read more about it, more about the library itself there. So I strongly recommend. If you, I mean, the QR code will be there at the end also, so don't worry. So yeah, if you want to play around with the Expo Router, you can either install it into your existing code base or just initialize a new Expo app with a template. Keep in mind that if you want to add Expo Router to your app yourself, there's a bit more to it than just simply installing a package. You have to do some more configuration. But it's all nicely explained in the docs, so you won't be lost for sure. You can also, if you know Solito or if you do Solito apps, you can also create a new Solito app with Expo Router pre-installed there as well. So yeah. And I think now we can talk about the example file structure of the project, because if you want to use Expo Router, you will need to place all your files with screens and with components inside a folder called app. And the name of the folder has to be called app. You might ask why. It simply follows a convention of naming things in Expo. You have Expo JSON file for configuring your project. So the same way was to name, I guess, this folder here. And basically, all files located in an app directory are going to be your screens. And now you may wonder, but hey, not all files in my code base are screens. And that's true, but don't worry. Expo Router treats a file as a screen only when certain conditions are met. So in order for Expo Router to recognize a file as a screen, the file itself has to meet a few conditions. One of them being that a file has to be located in an app directory. The second condition would be that the file contains a valid React component, and also the file has to use a default export. If you do these things, then a file will be perceived as a screen. And probably you already get an idea of how it works by looking at the code snippet. Actually, not the code, but yeah. Each file has automatically a path assigned to it. So, for example, a screen that is located in a profile.js file will have a path assigned to it of /profile, etc. You can nest the files inside folders. Then, if you do so, the path to a certain screen will be prepended with the name of this folder. Before we go further, also just take a look at the last line. Let's say this is a file that has a dynamic root. If you want to have dynamic roots, Expo Router supports that. All you have to do is to just wrap the file name in square braces. Yeah. On the previous screen, you could see some files nested inside a folder. You can also nest the files inside something called groups. A group is basically a folder, with this exception that the name is wrapped with parentheses. If you nest files this way, basically the paths that are generated for the screens are not going to be prepended with the name of this group /folder. Also, if you group your files, if you group your screens, you are able to add layouts to them. Layouts are like kind of parents, something like wrappers around the sibling files, around the screens that are defined in sibling files. And thanks to layouts, you can, for example, wrap a certain screen with a reusable UI element, or also thanks to layouts, you can instantiate a new stack navigator or button tabs navigator, or basically any other kind of navigator that you can have. Yeah, and that would be it for as far as the file structure is concerned. Now we can take a look at the API. So as I mentioned, if you want to create a new screen, you have to put it in a file that is located in a Nav directory. Screen has to be like a proper React component. It has to use the default export. In your app, you probably want to put some links, redirect the user to some places. You can easily do that with Expo Router. Nothing complicated. You can do it in a more imperative way or in a more declarative way. It's up to you. You can use a link component. You can use router hook. You can use a redirect component. You can use also use navigation hook, thanks to which you have access to navigation props. You can invoke methods like go back or can go back. You also have access to the state of the navigation. So all pretty nice things. Yeah, and now let's go back to the layouts. When you create a layout file, and when you want to create a layout, you have to create a file, as I said, in a folder. You have to name it _layout, and then inside you declare it. So if you want the layout to act as a wrapper that's supposed to render some additional content in it, for example, I don't know, if you do web apps, you probably want to display a navbar or some footer, and it should be visible on a few pages. So you can easily do it this way with layouts. You can also initialize a new navigators with a little help of layouts. All you have to do is to just import a stack component or tabs component. These are stack navigator and bottom tabs navigators. They are available out of the box from the Expo Router library. You may wonder if, for example, you are able to instantiate a drawer navigator, for example. There's no problem. You can also do it. Expo Router allows you to do it. I will show you later how it can be done as well. Yeah, so basically it should be like self-explanatory. Obviously you can override some default props in the navigators, and you can also override a default config for a particular screen in this way. So I think we are done with the second part of the presentation, and we can now transition to a live coding part. Hopefully it will go smoothly. Before we jump to the IDE, let's maybe go over mockups. The thing we're going to build, it's going to be like a simple application with a list of friends. It's supposed to work on web and on mobile. On mobile, it's supposed to have this native navigator thingy. So yeah, and whenever you press a friend, you should be redirected to a friend's details page, which is going to look like that. And all this is going to be available only for the authorized users. So if user is logged out, we will show him or her a registration flow, which in our case will be just an empty screen with one word inside it. Yeah, so before we start, let's simply go over the code. I have a starter repo prepared with some stuff already there. So we have a text component, which is simply like a bolded text from React Native. And please note that this component is not using default export, and thus Expo Router will not recognize this component as a screen. We also have a hook, use Auth hook, which is going to act as some kind of navigation system, let's say. In our case, it just returns some user data. And we also have our free screens, initial versions of the screens. And yeah, all these components are using default exports, and thanks to it, let's say, the Expo will recognize them as screens. And yeah, since the file is named, for example, register, then if we run the app, if we try to navigate to /register, we will be presented with the screen. If we navigate to a root URL, we're going to see this screen here. Sorry, and if we navigate to our friend details screen with a dynamic route, then we will see this screen. So let's see if it works. Let's start the bundler. For the sake of previewing, the app will use an iOS simulator and a web browser. So as you can see, the app built. Let's see if the web version works as well. It works, and now let's test out the links. So right now we are at a root path, root URL. Let's try to navigate to our register screen. It works. And let's test out our dynamic route. Works just as well. Let's also see how it works on mobile. Let's try to open register screen. Yep, it worked. And let's test the dynamic route. Let's try to open /Phoebe. Okay, it works. So I think we can now implement like a first feature, which would be putting our friends list screen and friend details screen into one group, and wrapping them with a layout, and then creating a stack navigator inside this layout. So let's move these two files to a group called main, for example. We could also move them to a folder, but then the paths to these screens would be prepended with a folder name. So we will just use a group. By the way, for example, 2 months ago, if you were to play around with the Expo Router, the groups, they were called fragments, and now they got renamed to groups. So yeah, now we have a group, and let's also add a layout file. And in this layout file, we want to instantiate a stack navigator. We can do it like this. In the mockups, we have a custom title in the header. So let's also add it in our app. You can easily override like default settings, just as if you were using React navigation, for example. So we have our stack navigator. Let's now add some redirections. You can use router hook to push a user to a certain location. In our case, we want to do it whenever a friend is pressed, a friend name is pressed on our list. And then what will happen is we will redirect a user to our other screen. And now we also want to display friend's name on the screen, and also put this name in the header. So we can do it by using use search params hook. that comes from the Expo Router. Basically, this hook it returns an object with the data that is available for us in a path. So because we have a file called friend, and because the name of this file is wrapped with square braces, then like this segment of the link is going to be like mapped to a value here. So our file is called friend, and the value will also be accessible at the key of friend. Now that we have it, we can put it in our header, just like that. And we can also put the friend name on the screen. And now we can just check it out if it works as it should. Let's rebuild everything. So yeah, as you can see, we have our main screen. It has a header that we configured just a moment ago. When we press friend, we are being redirected to a friend's detail page. We get like this native behavior. We have the transition. The screen is not, rendered like that. We have the gestures also in place. So yeah, let's see how it looks on web. We also have a list. We can click on the friend, and we are being redirected to the details page. So I think this part is done, and now we can tackle our authorization system, so to say. We can use the layout component in this case as well. So let's create a layout file in the root directory. So since the layout file will be like rendered first, we can simply return everything that is a sibling to it. But additionally, we can put some logic inside it that would evaluate whether we are logged in or not. So let's quickly create a root component. Let's just return a slot. So basically right now nothing will happen because we are returning a slot component, which is going to return the current screen either way. So yeah, and now we want to check whether user is logged in or not, and for that we can use our mock logging system, let's say. We have access to user data. We also want to check what is the current segment opened. We can use segments hook from the Expo Router library. Basically, this hook is going to return a list of all the segments that are forming a current root. So if we have a friend details screen opened right now, then the segments would be a list of our main group, and then the other segment would be the name of our screen, which is a friend. And we will use this information to check where are we. And we also are going to want to redirect user based on the information whether we can be redirected somewhere or not. We will use a replace method. And now let's just put some quick logic in the use effect here. So whenever we are logged out, so we don't have user data, and whenever we are not already in our registration flow, In this case, we want to push users to our registration page, registration screen. And whenever we are logged in and whenever we are still on the registration screen, then we want to push users to our main screen, which is our list of friends. So yet again, let's rebuild everything. By the way, currently our use Auth hook returns a user data, so it means that we at some point we logged in, and as you can see, we have our screen opened on the friends list. The same should be for web. Let's see if it works. It works. If we now try to open, for example, a register page, we won't be able to, because the register page is meant to be seen only by unauthorized users. Let's also test this behavior for our app, mobile app. And yet again, the app won't allow to open this screen. Let's test it out for a scenario where we are not logged in. As you can see, we can only see our registration part, registration flow. If we try to open our main screen, we are blocked. Yeah, and I think that's it. I mentioned that I will show you also how to quickly create a drawer navigator, for example. Let me just do it quickly. On main branch, I have a drawer navigator already created, so we can do it easily. All you have to do is just install the drawer React Navigation drawer library if you want to use the drawer by React Navigation, and just initialize the navigator, export it, while also putting it through with layout context, and you are pretty good to go. You can now wrap some screens with it, and we can quickly try to do it. We can move our main group one level deeper. And we can also create a layout file in our new drawer group, and do something like that, and this should result in a drawer navigator being visible, hopefully. Yeah, as you can see, you have a drawer. Obviously, you would want to change the config, get rid of this doubled header, etc. Yeah. That's it. Thank you for your attention. To end my presentation, I would like to give kudos to Expo team for great work. Yeah, and here's the QR code for the article that I mentioned, if you want to read it. Yeah, thanks.